Virginia Bass Cast. Here today we're going to do some pro pointers for you, and today we're going to talk about something that not a lot of people fish, but it's become pretty productive lure for me. A swim jig. And swim jig's real good. Around here we fish a lot of clear, high pressured lakes, and this jig right here, what it does, it's a thinner weed guard than say a flipping jig. It's got a pointed nose, and the reason I think a swim jig does so real around here, it's very natural looking, but also it's a little more subtle than say like a chatterbait or a spinnerbait. And I think that fish, you know, that get accustomed to seeing those faster moving lures will react to this bait when they're a little skittish of a spinnerbait. I personally have a hard time. I'm not a dragger. I don't like to fish slow. I like to move, and this is something that I found works for me, that I can fish fast, cover water, and still get those shy, skittish fish to eat. For me, color selection, I try to keep my swim jig color selection basic, as I do with all of my fishing. You know, in a clear type water here, like what we've got a lot of bluegill and brim that the bass are feeding on, and I'm going to use a green pumpkin, you know, some orange throat, some lighter yellow on the belly, and I do like the the skirts that have the hub collar. They give a little more action. I usually tip it with a crawfish type trailer. This is a chigger crawl. This works very well for me, and I don't know if you can tell, but I actually have colored the tips of this chartreuse. But in the early spring, fish are feeding up on shad. I'm going to fish a shad color. I fish a sexy shad color a lot of the times. And anytime that you're getting fish to eat a spinnerbait in the spring, you can also go back behind yourself and catch fish on this swimming jig, fishing it the same way. It's also very effective if you're reeling it in and a fish is following it. You can drop that rod tip and let that bait drop, and that fish, a lot of times they'll go out after it, where if a spinnerbait, sometimes that extra flash will actually spook them a little bit. So when you're fishing swim jigs, just remember, to just like any bait, match the hatch. Fish your colors that are natural to the water and to the forage that the bass are feeding on at that particular time. The knot that I like to tie when I'm fishing a swim jig, I tie an improved clinch notch. What you want to do is you want to go through the eye of your bait, go up, make a loop, and I wrap it 5 to 7 times. And then what you're going to do after you go around, you're going to go through your bottom opening with your tag. You've got a loop that's made there. You're going to go through that. You're going to bring it back up and go through your top loop. A lot of people have a problem with this knot bundling up on them. What you want to do is you want to make sure that when you're pulling that tag, that you're keeping all the lines parallel with one another, so that they don't make a knot. You're going to wet that line, and you want that knot to be in tight formation before you get it down, so that it can't knot up on you. You're going to pull it tight, secure it, and I just leave about 1/8 of an inch of tag or so. And what I'm fishing this on is, I'm fishing this on fluorocarbon. A lot of people fish this on braid. I have a hard time taking away from fish with braid. So 90% of the time I'm fishing this swimming jig on fluorocarbon line. The rod that I actually use a dedicated swimming jig rod. This is a All-Star ASR series jig and swim rod. This rod's got a good handle on it. It's able to allow me to get leverage on fish. It's also got a good tip on it. I can take this rod, I've got enough tip, I can place this jig under docks, I can place it, tight to cover, I can ease it in the water, and what I prefer to use is I use a 6:2 to 1 gear ratio. Any reel that you see in my hand will always be a quantum, and I prefer a 6:2 to 1 when I'm fishing a swimming jig. And what it does, it allows you, it's kind of middle of the road. You can fish this fast enough if you need to burn it to get reactions out of fish. You can also slow down enough if you need to let that jig drop in the water some. and 6'2" to 1, if I get a fish on, it's plenty fast enough to get him back to the boat. We've talked about the swim jig, we've talked about the knot we're going to tie with it, we've talked about color selection. Now I guess really the only thing left to do is you know, practice our presentation. When I'm fishing a swim jig, like I say, I'm gonna target orient this bait. I'm looking for cover. This particular body of water's got a lot of grass and a lot of stumps in it. And in the grass mats, I'm burning it over it, through it, or I'm casting it beside stumps and I'm beating it off the stumps. What you want to do is pick you a target. There's a stump out there. There's a couple of them. You want to pick that target and you want to let the fish tell you how you want it. I'm going to vary my retrieve. I'm going to go up, down. I'm going to pop it. I'm going to let it pull against stumps. I'm going to pull it through the grass. And I'm going to put the trolling motor on high with this bait, and I'm going to cover a lot of water. And if you get a lot of short strikes on this, you know, it may be time to slow it down a little bit, or it may simply, you know, just be time to change colors. But if you practice all of these tips and techniques, I think you too will catch a lot more fish on a swim jig. Give it a try next time you're at your favorite lake.